Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Masechtas Bava Metzia daf Kuf 100. We're going to begin on the very top of Kuf Amud Aleph by the new Masnisin. Let's see the Mishnah. Hamachlif par b'chamor. Let's say a person does an act of chalipin, a cow for a donkey, v'yolda, and all of a sudden it gives birth. V'chein hamoicher shivchasa v'yolda. And now over here, for some reason, it switches from chalipin to mechira, which we'll see Rashi why. So too, when it comes to a moicher, he sells his maidservant, v'yolda, and the shivcha gives birth. Now, ze'imer ad shelo macharti. So this person is going to say, who's selling, that the birth took place before, and therefore the offspring is mine. I only had this the animal or the shivcha giving birth after I already coined it, and therefore the vlad is mine. So in that case, we split it up as apparently it's a case of shema b'shema, and Sumchus holds mamon amutal b'safik. We say yachloku, we divide it up. So let's look at question TB 27. Hamachlif par b'chamor v'yolda oim hamoicher shivchasoi v'yolda. So madua tana hamachlif b'para v'lo hamoicher kedetana gab shivcha. Great question, and this is only found in Rashi. Says Rashi, l'hachi naket hamachlif v'loimer hamoicher parasoi v'yolda. Why does it say that? The ilu moicher b'mois. Let's say you actually purchase this animal with money, so lo kani lokech hadamashach. So the buyer can only be kaina the animal once as mashicha, because even though it's true monies were exchanged, we, according to this shita, so machlokas, we say when it comes to metalton, you can only be kaina mashicha, and mois is not kaina, midr is not kaina. And therefore, v'kivan the mashach. If, let's say, Mashiach was already done, which means now the buyer actually has the animal in his rishus, it should be known, you should just be able to see where the birth took place, in my rishus or your rishus. There's no sveka. Okay. If chalipin was done, Mashiach does not is not required. If one of them did Mashiach on one of the animals, so it's a tremendous point. So if we exchange a cow for a donkey, and I pull your cow, you automatically own the donkey, even though it's in my rishus, or vice versa. So therefore, we can understand. Let's say again, we're talking about a cow, so the cow could still be in my rishus, even though now you really are technically kind it. As we saw in Perka Zahav, Kivan Shezachazeh Neschayv Zeh B'Chalipin. Lefi Shekeshemashach Zeh B'Hapara, that's a chamor. So the proper way of saying it is the other way around. That the Baal Hapara still has the cow in his rishus. He's selling, he's exchanging it. Now he did Mashiach on the chamor. So now the chamor is his, and now the para belongs to the other guy. Niknas apara l'bal chamor, v'eni yodua im yolda ulo yolda, and all of a sudden you see that there's this para had an offspring. So the question is, who does it belong to? That's the pshat. Let's see what I wrote in Rashi in question TB 27. Ein shum safek in mechira miglal she'ein mois kainais. V'sarch lasos mashicha v'az bar hadavar. That's really the answer. Mashenkin bekinin chalipin habehema kaina hakol b'kol makam shehu v'az rak le'inyan chalipin yesh dugma kamishnatenu v'loy b'mechira. Beautiful, really beautiful shot. Okay, very well written. Okay. I think it's going to be the only question. That whole daf is the only question on that test. Very difficult question to ask. Okay. So that's case number one. Back in the Mishnah. V'chein, so too, hayuloi beis avadim. Let's say a person, so yachloku. Hayuloi beis avadim. Let's say you have two slaves. Echad gadol v'echad katan. One is bigger, one's smaller, one's more expensive than the other. V'chein beis sada yisachas gadol v'achas katan. Again, one big, one smaller field. Halkechaimer gadol akachti. The buyer says it was the bigger one, because obviously the more expensive one. He's wanting to claim that he has the higher value. Let's say the seller of the field doesn't know if it was the bigger or smaller field, then in Zacha B'Gadol, based on the concept, as we're familiar with, of Bari B'Shema, then Bari Adif. So we're going to believe the person who is confident. Let's say the seller says, no, I'm telling you it was the smaller one I sold to you. So Einu El Katan. Again, because it's Bari B'Shema or Adif, just the other way around. Both of them seem pretty confident. Yishava HaMoicher Sha'Katan Machar. Since it's Bari B'Bari, so the Gemara is going to ask on this. So the seller must make a shvuah that actually he sold the smaller one. And then finally, as we know, Yachloku, which is the general rule of Sumchus, when it comes to a Shema v'Shema, the din is that we split it up. So, in fact, Gemara, Amai Yachloku. Why does the Mishnah say divide it? Which is really what Rashi saw before in the Mishnah. But why don't we just look where it is? So wherever this animal is now, we'll just say it's in his hands, right? So possession is like 9/10 of the law. So if you want to take it away from your friend, it's your chiv to have to come up with a proof. So you're right, but here we're talking about menace ba'agam. It's in the swamp, and it's like no man's land. So shivcha nami the kaima b'simta. And shivcha, we're talking was in a simta. Says Rashi, Karen Zavius, like in a corner, hasmucha or chava. That's where animals and the bottom were sold, so it's not like in someone's property. Okay, so now we have a different question. V'nukma achezkas demarakama. Why don't we go after the chazaka of the original owner? Why don't we assume that whoever the original owner was, it's his, right? Because it was his, so keep it in his rishos. So when we're not sure, we just say that it should be split up. So that's only the case where it's Shema v'Shema, like we established in the Seif of the Mishnah. Zemer Yodea and Yodea, Zemer and Yodea, both of them don't know. However, the Rishos we're talking about, where both of them are confident that the Yeled, or the fetus, the child, whatever was born, in there once it was already owned by them, so therefore, or before it was sold. So it's a case of a bari. So why would we say a chloku according to Sumchus? So Amarabba Baravun in Sumchus available bari. It's not so. In fact, even in our Mishnah, where each person says 100%, still he holds that we're yachloku. Even by case of bari. Rabbi Omer Olam Ki Amar Sumchus Shema v'Shema. Really, the only time Sumchus says his din is only by a case of Shema v'Shema. Will he say he split it? Of a Bari will Omar. However, it's Bari, like the Reish of our Mishnah, will not. So then how do we understand our Mishnah which says Yachloku? Utini ze Omer Shema ad shula macharti. V'ze Omer Shema mishula kachti. In other words, just add that in, that our Mishnah is only talking about a case of a Shema. Okay, let's look at question 7. Hamoicher shivchasai v'yolda ze'omer anshla macharti v'zemer mishla kachti madin alib de sumchas v'alib de chachamim. So alib de sumchas pligiba im armi yachloka fil b'bari b'bari o de moidel chachamim. Alib de chachamim azlin baser de hamuchsuk v'i kaima b'simta azlin baser mar kama hamotz b'chaver v'raya. Okay, beautiful. It's not. Zeoimer en Yodea v'zemer en Yodea, which is Yachloku, which is a case of Shema. Now Bishlam or Rava, I can understand according to Rava that he makes this distinction of Sumchus between Shema and Bari. So with the Seif Shema v'Shema, Reishanami Shema v'Shema. So therefore, that's why in order for the ratio which says Yachloku, he would have to establish it as he did, that it's actually a Tani. You have to insert that it's Shema. You have to add the word Shema. El Rabba bar Rav Huna, D'Amar ein Omer Sumchas Afil in Omer Sumchas Afil Bari Bari, that Sumchas even by Bari Bari will say the din of Yachloku. So then Hashta Bari Bari Amar Yachloku Shema Shema Maboy. Why do we even need the last case to tell us the case of Shema V'Shema, that Yachloku, if in fact even by Bari Bari he still says Yachloku? You don't even need that case. So Imisham Holo Ir, that's not actually a proof, because Tana Seifel Gili Resha, this is done so many times when Tashav Sachar and Kedushin and many places, that it mentions both to potentially explain the other one. Shloi Timer, a person shouldn't say the Resha Shema V'Shema, of Bari Bari Loi. Maybe you would make a distinction between Shema Shema and Bari Bari. So Tana Seifa, Shema V'Shema, so the last part of our Mishnah is Shema V'Shema, Mechal the Reisha Bari Bari, V'Afil Hachi Yachloku. So again, it's possible that you can say, well, what's the purpose of Shema V'Shema? It's obvious that the Reisha is Bari Bari. No, is the case Bari Bari. No, maybe you should actually say that the Reisha is actually a case of Shema V'Shema, and that's the only time that the din is. But by Bari Bari, maybe he doesn't hold Yachloku, which again, according to the sheet, they actually is how he does make that. There are those who make that distinction. However, again, sometimes the Mishnah will mention two cases, even though it's like Zu and Sarach or Zu, that you really don't need the second case, or actually Pumfaker, you have the bigger chiddush at the Reisha and then the lesser chiddush at the Seifa, but it's spelled out clearly of Zeh Omer in Yodea in order to establish that it must be that the Reisha is talking about a case of Bari Bari, because otherwise you would think maybe the Reisha is Shema V'Shema. Okay, Tanan. Zeh Omer Gadav Zeh Omer Katan. Yishava HaMeicher Shekatan Macher. So the din is that we're dealing with an element of confidence. Each one is Bari Bari, so a shvua is required. Now Sumcha says Yachloku without a shvua. Now Bishlam Rabbi Diamar Ki Yamar Sumcha Shema B'Shema Bari Bari Lo Yamar Mishum Hachi Yeshama, because this is not what Sumchus does hold like this. Sumchus only holds you do not make a shvua and you just divide up. Davka when it comes to Shema B'Shema. In the case of Bari Bari, then you do make a shvua. So that fits in very nicely according to that opinion. Elo Rabba Bar Rav Huna. The Omer Ein Omer Sum in Omer Sumchus. I keep saying that. In Omer Sumchus, I feel Bari Bari, that you'll even say by a case of Bari Bari Yachlok without a shvua, Amay Shava Ma Moicha Yachlok Miboyle. So Moida Sumchas Hechad Ika Shvua Deraisa Get to be Inan Lamemra. Come on. Sumchas will agree where there is a Shvua Deraisa, like we need to say later on. What does that mean? Says Rashi. Later on, Rashi says, "Kaman Mokmin in law, we're going to establish this midikatel yada, where the hand was chopped off. Telav heluchu. It's not a case of heluch, which will explain what that is, even though we discussed it at very great length already at the beginning of the Masechta. Hadikam moidi li begave the islay nishboyin al havadim the islay tiny bechitim v'hoidaloi b'sa'arin chayev." Okay, so basically, without giving away too much, this is going to be the next Gemara, that there's actually a chiyuv shvua in this case. If there's a real chiyuv shvua, then you have to make a shvua. So he'll admit that that's required. Okay. So let's see. So they're arguing. I say it was an adult eved. You say it was a katan. Two totally different things. They're not agreeing on anything. So it says you have to make a shvua. You're not admitting or denying the same thing. So the only time there's a din of being a shvua might have mixed us a taina, says Rashi, nun. I say you owe me $100. You say yes, I owe you 50, but I don't know, but not the other 50. I don't owe you the other 50. That's when you're chayiv, because you're moide b'mixas. You're admitting to half or part of what he's saying. Dami l'tainu kufa hoidelo nun, says Rashi. Hasan mixes tainu atzim hoidelo. Avazem moidelo be'evet acher. It's talking about a totally different slave. So, and regarding the condition, the thing itself, he's saying lahadam. He's saying lohadavar ba'olam. that's question number one. Question number two, why would you require Shvuah? This is a case where it's mamish here, says Rashi. Even if I say you owe me wheat, and you say no, but I owe you barley, that there would be a chiv shvuah, it's still an issue of, it's a case of hiluch, says Rashi. The one who admits, he could take it. He's actually saying, oh, I don't owe you a big one, it's not the big one, it's a small one, so it's right here. That there's a man diarmer that when it comes to moed mixas ataina, that's only in the situation where the thing is not here. But if the thing is here, so then there's no din moed mixas ataina. That's a din of haluch. So here the avadim are here, the field is here, so it's a case of haluch, and therefore there's a man diarmer that haluch you don't make a shvuah. Vote a third question, einish manal avadim. Here we're talking about avadim, we're talking about field. Well, let's just see what we're sticking with avadim. You don't make a shvuah on an eved because an eved is comparable to karka and enishwain al karkais. We don't make a shvuah on land or on avadim. So how do we answer these problems? So let's look at question 8. I think question 8 is just what are the questions. Either because time b'chitim b'chaydo b'sayrim haluch, and also avdi k'mekarkoi v'nishmoyim al kfiras karkois. Okay, so that was question 8. Pretty easy, just for summing up the question. Now we have a few answers. So Omer Rav gives one answer, but ta'inu damei. Actually, we're not talking about the eved or the field. Let's just talk about the eved. We're not talking about the eved, a big eved or small eved. We're actually talking about the value of a big eved. So the argument is not about an eved that we're going to say it's an eved, you don't make a shvu on. No, we're talking about money. So what happened? Demei eved gadol, demei eved katan. Demei sadik gadayla, demei sadik katana. So we're talking about fields too. So that's what it means. In other words, I gave you money for a field or for an eved, but not the eved or the sud itself, and therefore, again, we're not talking about the issue of a shvuah because it's like an eved or karka. It's not a case of haluch because it's not here. We're not talking about an eved, we're talking about money. That money's gone, and we are talking about money. He said, I gave you $1,000 to buy an eved, and you say no. Well, you only gave me 500. So it's mamish case of money mixes. Shmuel Eimer says the second answer, but ta'inu ksus eved gadol ksus eved katan. The dispute is about the clothing of the eved. So, or oimri sadik gadoyel, the bundles of sheaves for a big field, the oimri sadik katana, or the bundle of sheaves for a small field, as we continue to cook omid beis. So, ksus, if we're dealing with the clothes of an eved, so masha tana loy hoida loy masha hoida loy taina. Okay, we're not talking about the eved, so we're talking about metaltalin, but maybe it's not here, but so it's not an issue of haluch, but it's not the same clothes. So my answer is it's not true. It could be because the Omer Kedomer Papa b'diyalfe hachanami b'diyalfe, says Rashi. Shebeged shalim hoya. It's just one big cloth. Yadain mechuber that's attached. Ze Omer ksus gadol machartilcha. Ze Omer ksus katana. So he said, no, I purchased this amount of cloth, and you said, no, I purchased this larger amount of cloth. So therefore, it is the same thing as claiming, it says, yes, it was this much, I agree, but not this whole thing. Okay. Kashli Rav Hoishia, midi ksus katani, eved katani. So it doesn't say ksus, it doesn't say eved. It says eved. It doesn't say ksus, eved katani. So therefore, I don't like that answer. El Rav Hoishia gives a third interpretation. Kagoin shetainu eved b'ksusai, that there's a taina we're going to see through Gilgul Shvua from the beged to the eved, Masada and the field b'amoreha. So therefore, that's going to be the answer. It's not that there's an actual chiv shvua, but it's al Gilgul Shvua. Based on the clothes, but we are talking about an eved, we are talking about a field, but really there's no chiyuv shvua onto itself. But since we're talking also about the clothes, so then you can also make other shavuos. Vikati ksus, when it comes to the ksus, masha taineloi hoidoloi, masha hoidolo taino, so Omar Papa, this is where it was said before, vidiyalfe. Again, it's the stitching of pieces of large cloth. Kashu Rav Sheshis, Zoikikin Aslash Mi'inan. You're trying to tell me that there's a din of Gilgal Shvua? Like, we've never heard that before? Tanina, we learned that in Kedushin. Zaikin hanachasim shenahem achrayas, as hanachasim shesham achrayas, lishava land. Even though, as we said, you cannot make a shvua on karka, and ishmoim al kvirs karkais. However, if you already have a chiyav shvua on metaltalin, so then al gilgal shvua, which we went out from a saita, the din is you can also make a shvua on that too. So we already know this. So there's no chiddush in this. Elam or Rav Sheshis, a fourth answer. Hamani Rav Meir Hidiyamar Abdika Metaltal Dami. What was the whole question? That you can't make a shvua because an eved is like karka? No, according to Rav Meir, an eved is like metaltal. Vikati Masha Tanaloi Hoidoloi Masha Hoidoloi Taino. These are two different avadim. So Savul Rabbi Gamliel, he holds like Rabbi Gamliel. He learns like this: Tainu Chitin v'Hoidu Sa'irin Potter. If let's say you say you owe me wheat, and I say, well, no, but I owe you barley, so there's no chiyav shvua of moed v'mixus because they're two separate things. However, Rabbi Gamliel Mechayev, Rabbi Gamliel Taka says, when in this case you are chayev. So that answers that question. So Kati Helachu, it's still Helach because these avadim are here. So Amarava Avda de Kata Liyade. We're talking a case where the small slave is now missing a hand. The Sadeh Shechafar Babar Shichan Amidas. Or we're dealing with a field in which there are massive ruinings of it because of the holes. Says Rashi, Vahu Eved Katan Demoidele Begave. He's now admitting liability for monetary compensation. And therefore that's the case. We're not talking about the Eved himself, we're talking about the compensation for the loss of that hand or for the damage of the field. V'ha Rab Meir if Hashemin lay. Understand, Rab Meir, I thought, held the opposite that regarding an Eved. Did not. Guzzle behema. Let's say you steal an animal, viskina, and all of a sudden it gets older. Avadim, you sold an Eved. V'yiskinu, and it got older, so therefore it doesn't have the same value. Misham kishas exelos. Therefore, you have to pay at the time that it was stolen, when it was more robust and strong. When it comes to an Eved, you can say har shachal v'necha. Why? Says Rashi, as we see in the Gemara in Bava Kama, karka and exelos. Just land itself also cannot be stolen. The whole makam shehiber shus baleho imedes, and therefore wherever it is, it's like just take it, it's yours. And the Eved kamer karkari dami, and an Eved is like land, and therefore even though the Eved is older, you can say take your Eved back. But that's a problem because Rav Meir clearly then holds that avadim are like karka. So therefore, how do we say that the avdas kamataltal dami? It's a whole kasha. It's not a question. Kide machlef rabba baravua, he actually switched the opinions. V'tani Rameir omer misham kishas egzela v'chachamim omer avadim harishal chavanecha. Actually, Rameir does hold that an Eved is like metaltalin, and therefore that's the reason why you have to pay kishas egzela. The chachamim are the ones who hold that avadim are like karka. That's why you say harishal chavanecha. Okay. So we're keeping Rameir solid that he holds that an Eved is like metaltalin. Ela memai diksavar Rameir makshinin karko Eved. So what was this whole reason why we did what we did is because we had this kasha of karka to Eved. Ma Eved ishbayin. When it comes to an Eved, you make a shvua of karka nishbayin. So too by karka you should make a shvua. Dilma Eved hu din nishbayin of a karka lo. Maybe you don't make a shvua, we just don't make a shvua on karka. Lo sachadaktach. The sanya hamachlef par b'chamor, our mishnah. The yolda, and it gives birth. The cow gives birth. The chen hamoicha shivchas of yolda. Shivcha gives birth. Zemer b'shusi. V'zeh shaisik. Actually, not entirely our mishnah. One says it happened in my rishus, so it's mine. V'zeh shaisik, and the other one is silent, so zacha. So because it's basically a case of bar v'shema, so therefore the one who says zeh omer b'shusi is zaychid because he's bari. However, if it's a shema, like sumchas, you divide it. It's bari and bari. Yeshava hamaycher sherishusa yolda. So you actually have to make a shvua. It says in all cases you should make, where there's a chiv shvua, you make a shvua and don't pay. So we see over here there's actually a chiv shvua. You don't make a shvua. You don't make a shvua on land. It must be the fact that Rameir says you do make a shvua, and the Chachamim say you don't make a shvua on avadim or karka. It must be Rameir holds that you do make a shvua in that case. Mamai dilma kishem ka'amrule kehechi deoidis lun bekarkois. Maybe he's saying just like you should admit to me by land that when it comes to land you don't make a shvua. So oidi lun nami bavadim. You should also admit to me when it comes to avadim you don't make a shvua. Tayda, I'll prove it to you. Did not. Rameir Omer yesh devarim shehen kekarka v'yesh v'ein kekarka. There's some things that are like land and not like land. The Chachamim moedim and the Chacham don't agree. So Ketzad. For example, Yud Gefanim to Unais. Let's say you have 10 grapevines laden with grapes. Masartel Chai gave to you. V'lo Emer Einu El Chamesh. It's actually it was only 5. So Rameir Mechayev. Rameir hold in that case you're chayev. Anything attached to the ground is like land. What is this case? We said it was a novim. We're talking about grapes. To omdos libatzer. They're ready to be harvested. They're ready to be picked. Some say since they're as though they're all ready to be picked, it's ki'u like they're already picked. And then according to the other shita, marsavar lav kibutsuras damyan. But if it wasn't to be picked, let's say these grapes are not ready, then even Rameir holds no shvua would be made, says Rashi, of the karkos uvitzarchel karka maida. He'll admit that no shvua is made. So we really want to say, therefore we can't really say this whole thing of Rameir, because apparently Rameir holds not like we just established. And therefore, we're going to establish like Rav Hoshia that what we're talking about, we're talking about a case of Gilgal Shvua. We already had this case of Gilgal Shvua. We learned this already in Masechtas Kedushin, as I said. So then why do we have to mention over here? Itzrach, maybe we still need this again. Salchadat Lamina, Ksus Eved Ke'eved Dami. That Oimrit Sadek Kesadeh Dami, Kamash 1. You would maybe think that the clothes of the man is the man. And therefore, we should maybe say, just like there's no chiv shvua on an eved, can't make a shvua on an eved, also on his clothes. No. The chiddush is those are considered separate things. Okay. Ema Seifa, what does it say also there? So they're both bari. So then the shvua is required that it was given birth in his rishos. O Rabba bar Rav Huna. Do you remember ein oimer in oimer sumches afil bari bari? That sumches even my bari says yachlok without a shvua. My yeshava meicher. Why does he make a shvua? Yachlok miboy. He should actually just miboy. He should say. So what is sumchas hechadika shvua deraisa with the katel yada kedarava? As we said, that maybe we're talking a case where a shvua deraisa is required. So even though maybe sumchas holds not just by shema b'shema, but also in case of bari, the din is that yachloku without a shvua. However, if we're dealing with a case with a chiv shvua, which is even an eved, even though normally don't make a shvua ein ishboyin al vadim, nonetheless, if we're talking about an eved's hand which was cut off, and therefore it's a monetary discussion about, again, admitting liability for monetary compensation, so therefore maybe in that situation, in that case, there would be a chiv shvua deraisa, and therefore in that case, sumchas would admit that since there's a chiv shvua, a shvua must be done. Ad kan.